Good morning. Welcome members of council, members of the public, members of the press. Thank you for attending this special full council. Move on to agenda item 1, declarations of interest. Councillor Mrs Bennett.
I declare an interest as called, I'm sorry, the others are on red. If somebody on red wants to be called Councillor Bennett.
Oh, well, Councillor Mrs Bennett's gone.
I declare an interest as coordinator of FRIST on all matters relating to transport on the agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Mumford.
I declare a small pecuniary interest in the steamship company. Anything to do with the airport or steamship company.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Peacock.
I declare an interest if any boating charges come up.
Thank you. Councillor Bilsborough, sir.
Chairman, I declare an interest insofar as my wife is a part-time tutor at Lifelong Learning. She's also a member of the registration department. If we speak on those particular items, I will leave the room.
Thank you. I think there was another light somewhere. Yeah. Your light's not on, but could you put your mic on? Thank you. Councillor Mrs Grottick.
Thank you, Chairman. I represent the Council on the Cornwall Partnership NHS Trust.
Councillor Hicks.
I declare an interest as a small shareholder for the steamship company.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chairman. I just need to declare an interest in a specific area of the budget. Obviously, it will not prevent me from taking part in the overall debate, but specifically relating to the reduction of senior managers, as my partner is one.
Thank you.
I have to declare an interest in item 6 on the budget, as obviously I am a senior manager.
Thank you.
And Chairman, likewise, I declare an interest in item 6, also as a senior
Thank
manager.
you. Mr Morrison.
Likewise, also declare an item in a declaration in item 6 as to deal with senior managers.
Thank you. Sorry, it's difficult to see.
No, ditto item 6.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry,
Chairman.
Mr Barrett.
Also, declare item 6. Also, my wife is employed as a bank member of staff of the school, but I don't believe this to be a pecuniary interest.
Thank you very much. Yep. Are there any other declarations of interest that I might have missed? Oh, sorry.
A small non-disclosable interest in that my wife is employed by the HUK, and so if this item comes up, I will leave the room.
Right, thank you. Right, is that achieved? Yes, thank you. Urgent items, none that I am aware of at this point. We'll move into part 1, reports requiring a decision. Item 3, the council tax base. The report of the senior manager, finance and resources.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, all. This report was provided to the Finance Audit and Scrutiny Committee last Tuesday. And that committee has the responsibility to set the council tax bases and the business rates bases for both households and commercial properties. That committee approved this report and it has now come back to full council for a ratification of that decision by members.
Thank you. May I know your... Councillor Bilsborough.
Yes, Chairman. This was discussed at Finance Audit and Scrutiny the other day. It's really a mathematical exercise, and I propose we accept the report.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Is that seconded by Councillor O'Neill? Thank you very much. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Is there anybody against? No abstentions? No, in that case that was unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 4, Council Tax 2016-17, the report of the Senior Manager.
Thank you, Chairman. This item follows on from the previous, but actually reflects the actual amount of council tax we will be bringing in, would like to bring in, and the relevant and the amounts for taxation purposes. It's a requirement under Local Government Act 1992 for us to provide council tax by the 11th of March in order that we can bill the preceptors, sorry, not the preceptors, bill the residents. Across the country, the government expectation has been to adopt a local taxation route. Government are moving to an approach which is removing revenue support grant. It is important that we maintain our council tax base and our ability to generate locally sourced income. That is why we are requesting the amount of 1.99% as council tax, along with the 2%, which is an adult social care levy. The paper is fairly technical in its remit, and it connects with item 6, the budget setting paper. I wish to know your views on this area.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Grottitt.
Yes, please could the Finance Officer just clarify my understanding, which is that the 2% ring-fenced goes towards the provision of adult social care facilities, and that if we do not go forward with the 2%, then there is an impact in the way our forward budget is calculated. Could you just clarify that, please?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that is true. The 2% is ring-fenced towards adult social care facilities and expenditure. And not extant, there is I think, a government view that were we not to adopt that approach, then we would not be viewed very well in terms of our 4-year provisional settlements.
Thank you. I thought that might be helpful to have your spoken clarification. Thank you.
Any further comments? No? In that case, may I know your wishes? Councillor Mrs. Mumford.
To propose items 1 and 2.
Thank you very much. Is that seconded? Seconded by Councillor O'Neill. Thank you very much. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. I think that was unanimous, but just to be sure, is there anybody against or abstaining? No. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 5, the council tax reduction scheme. Report of the senior officer.
Thank you, Chairman, again. This is another fairly technical item, which actually maintains the previous position that's been agreed by Council in the past. This area is administered for us by Cornwall Council. I have suggested that we continue this approach and the level set, but I've given the opportunity as part recommendation 2 to have this area reviewed in the coming year. We have not had sufficient time to fully appraise the effect of council tax reductions across residents. Therefore, I'm suggesting we maintain the current scenario. And I would like to hear your views on it, members, please.
Right. Members, Councillor Molson.
I'm quite happy to support the paper with a proviso that the re-examination of the reduction scheme should be scheduled for as early as we possibly can in the forthcoming year, because whichever way we look at it, it's going to have an impact on the overall budget. I know it's not massively significant, but nevertheless, in the current situation that we find ourselves in, perilous straits, I think we need to look at this very, very quickly as soon as the new year commences.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, I'll happily second that.
Right, so that was a proposer, yes, and a seconder, thank you. Are there any further comments? No? In that case, I shall take the vote. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Nobody against, no abstention, that's carried. Thank you very much. Then we move on to the budget. I'd like to make quite clear before the senior manager starts that we are setting this year's budget. I'm aware that there is considerable unhappiness about the provisional figures for the future. I share some of those concerns. What we shall be doing is holding an informal workshop to flesh out those figures and go back to the member input on them I haven't got my diary in front of me, but with luck I shall hold that workshop by the end of this week. If not, it will have to be next week. But we really do need to go through the projected figures. So today we are setting the fees and charges for 2016-17. I'll hand over to the Senior Manager. Give time for the Senior Management team to leave the room.
Madam Chairman, before we progress on this one, is it possible, I don't know whether it is or not, to take agenda item 7 before agenda item 6 on the grounds that if agenda item 7 fails, it's going to have an impact on agenda item 6?
Yeah, okay. Do we need the officers back in for agenda item 7?
Yes, please.
Right. Could somebody just call them back in, please? Sorry, exercise is good for you. Active, silly and all of that. Right, following the suggestion from Councillor Mawson, we're about to take agenda item 7. So that's page 19. We'll be giving the Senior Manager throat sweets at this rate. Please, could you go on with your report?
Thank you, Chairman. This is rather a technical item. Sorry, I'll just get to my note. Whilst reviewing the Treasury Management Strategy item, which is item 8 on this agenda, and under the advice of the Local Government Association, I've taken the opportunity to review our minimum revenue provision. Well, this is the a technical set-aside for debt provision, which we have incurred over the past in relation to not only actual debt, so PWLB and Public Works Loans Board, but also our in terms of borrowing from revenue and grant funding. Historically, we've used an approach which is determine the regularity method, which is a reducing balance of 4% of that debt per annum. So in effect, that debt never gets paid off. A number of authorities have taken and set a precedent for changing this approach and moved towards a more prudent approach, which is of equal instalments, repaying this debt over a 50-year lifespan. It equates to 2% per annum. In my view, this is a more prudent approach. It repays debt, whereas we don't have the residual balance left over. Additionally, it does actually contribute to kind of medium-term savings of a revenue nature. So it actually fits in well with the set of savings plans that are listed in item 6. Be happy to take any questions on this item.
Councillor Mawson.
Yeah, I've got a problem with this, Chairman. If you calculate out the net savings up to the year 2033, we end up with a figure of £841,522 saved in the short to medium term. However, if you add up the extra costs thereafter, the extra cost to the council is £1,522,655. Therefore, a net outgoing over the 50-year period of £681,000 over that period. My question is, do we consider that the short-term gain leaves us with an awful lot of long-term pain? I cannot, I'll be quite honest with you, justify an extra £600,000, whether it be over 40 years or 50 years at the moment, and it's going to cost this council and our children an awful lot of money in the future.
Mm-hmm. I have to say that I looked at these figures with great askance myself. However, having talked to colleagues on the mainland, they seem to think this is a technical device that is common throughout the land, but I'll leave the Senior Manager to Who's going to come in on that one, sir?
Chairman, would you mind if I brought in one of my colleagues, Joseph Abraham Quarantine?
Yes, could you please introduce yourself and put the light on, please?
Joseph.
Could you just put, because it's a microphone, so it'll pick up your voice.
It's Joseph Abraham Quarantine, working with the finance team on the budget. The figures you quoted there is right, but it is also based on some assumptions that some government grants will be received as we go forward. The reason why at the moment you have that huge gap is because we cannot forecast beyond 5 years how much grant we'll be getting from the government. And so the prudent approach is to not allocate any grant income beyond that time, hence why you have that difference. But chances are the grants will come in anyway. It's just that we don't know how much grant we'll be receiving, and you can just plug figures and throw them in.
Councillor Molson.
I'm still not happy on the grounds that we are basing a potential cost to this council of £600,000 on a chance that we might get some grant money in the future. Seems a bit thin, to say the least, that we are guarantee, unless we can guarantee this income, we are committing ourselves to a cost in the future, a net cost of over £600,000. We can't. Our gap in spending this year is £672,000.
I was going to say that at the end of that 50 years, that debt is exhausted. But on the existing approach, the 4% reducing balance approach, there is 681,000 left at that point. So there's still, with the existing approach that we're currently using, £681,000 left to pay. So I mean, the end of the process, the debt is the same; it will get repaid. There's no difference in that. The approach we're taking actually reduces that debt completely.
That's not what the paper elucidates to. It doesn't say that we're going to have a net debt at the end of the time of 681,000. The difference in charge is £680,000, and the net cost to the council.
It's on the table.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Under 3.6.
24.
Yeah, but they're the figures that are adding up in the net cost.
Councillor Molson, on page 24, it does show it in the table.
Yeah.
You did say that you agreed with me earlier on that this is a net cost to the council.
I don't believe I did agree to your point in that respect, Councillor. Greater respect. Actually, if I can refer you to 3.6, which is on page 21.
Page 24.
That current regularity method summates £681,000 of debt remains outstanding at the same date.
Councillor Bilsborough.
Chairman, yes, I've read this. If you look at the chart, the figures on page 23 and 24, which goes up to the year 2067, even the Chancellor of the Exchequer can't see more than 2 or 3 years ahead. So what kind of crystal ball are we using? Nobody can forecast what's going to happen to the economy over all these years. And I just find it hard to believe that we're expected to talk about things that are going to happen up to 2067. Some of us might be around, I won't.
Wasn't that the exact point of the Finance Department?
Yeah. Yeah.
That we can't predict the future?
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mrs. Grotty, do you want to comment?
Thank you. It may seem a small phrase, but right the way through this report, the word prudent is used. It may be prudent in one sense, in that it might be good for us at the moment, but surely as a council we should be thinking of the effect it would have on our children and the community going forward. And it doesn't seem to me very prudent to say, well, it'll suit us, but in the future it will be an added cost for someone else. It might be a good idea in the financial sense to carry this forward, but surely there's an argument that we actually ought to try and manage things in as tight a way as we can now, so that we won't be handing problems on for the future. Is that too simplistic?
Would you like to come in?
I think the current arrangement is based on a minimum revenue provision of borrowing 4% year on year. What we are proposing is reducing that borrowing to 2% over the course of the next 50 years. And it also means that at the end of the 50 years, the whole borrowing will be removed. If we keep to the current rate of borrowing at 4%, we will still end up, after 50 years, with 681. And surely the new proposal is probably the best approach for us as a council in terms of sustaining our finances.
And arguably for the future.
For the future as well. Yeah.
If we borrow less now,
yeah,
then our children will have
don't
less
have
to
pay
pay
for
back.
the debt in the future.
Councillor Francis.
Well, look, I think it was just a point of clarity, really, for Councillor Molson. I think the key here is the fact that one debt schedule remains with a balance at the end of it, and the other one is exhausted. And I think that element counteracts the difference in the interest rates past the period where we're saving money. So under those circumstances, and with that clarity, I think it is a prudent move.
Mm. Are there any more comments? There is, however, a typo in the recommendation, because the recommendation uses 40, where I think it should read 50. So please bear in mind that when you're taking the recommendation. Councillor O'Neill.
I'll propose a recommendation, Chairman.
With 50.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And with any appropriate typos amended.
Second.
Second, and thank you. Are there any further comments or questions around the table? No? In which case I'll take the vote. Those in favour of the amended recommendation regarding borrowing in equal instalments over a 50-year period, please show. Should please show clearly. Eight. Yep. 8. Thank you. Those against, please show clearly. 3.
Sorry, Mr. Graham, put your hand up, thank you. 3, Chairman.
Thank you. Those abstaining, please show clearly. Thank you. That's carried. Okay, we will go back to agenda item 6. We'll allow the senior managers time to leave the room. Just to point out that we are allowing the legal officer to stay in the room for the introduction, and then he will also leave the room. Right, if everybody is in place. Thank you very much. I'll just repeat my comments of earlier that we will be calling an informal workshop as soon as we can reasonably fit it in, hopefully this week, possibly next week, to discuss next.
Could you please bear in mind that off-handers would like to get here and have it at a suitable time?
I shall do my very best, yes, but this is a matter of extreme urgency, I feel.
If there's any way we can Skype or listen in.
Mm-hmm. Can you put your light on, Molly?
Or if there's any way that we can Skype or
Yeah, we will do our utmost to make it as inclusive as possible, because I take into account your comments, so, yep.
I just think it's very important that all members should be...
Absolutely, I quite agree. So, Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I was only going to ask, it may well be your intention anyway, but just whether or not we intend to take when we get to it, whether or not we intend to take the recommendations separately. I think we might be able to move the process along a bit if we can break it up.
We shall take the agenda item separately. Thank you. Right, it's going to be introduced firstly by the Chief Executive and then the Senior Manager of Finance. I'll hand over.
Thank you very much, Chairman. As members are aware, the budget setting meeting, this meeting is absolutely crucial meeting for Council and in its annual series of meetings. The setting of a balanced budget has been a challenging exercise this year, as we are still operating in an environment of austerity. The LGA have confirmed that the CSR, the Comprehensive Spending Review, has demonstrated another 2.7 billion cuts from local government for the year 16-17. So in this environment, the Section 151 officer and myself have worked very closely with government, trying to map out a future financial roadmap for the Council of the Isles of Scilly. And there are a lot of changes coming forward in the way that local government is being funded. And so therefore it is really key that as a local authority we work closely with government to identify how we can fund in future the services provided to the residents on this island. What is also becoming very, very clear is that the government is prepared and very keen to work with the Council in identifying a way how it can be supportive. But also, we need to be able to demonstrate that no precedents are being set in the way that government works with the islands. And therefore, some sort of arrangement or deal will need to be negotiated during the next financial year. Today, we are debating the budget for 16-17, and that is really quite important. Because local authorities have a legal requirement to set a balanced budget before the beginning of the financial year. And as the Section 151 officer just pointed out, this needs to be agreed by the 11th of March. The other few little points I want to make is that it is important to be aware that the Section 151 officer needs to be able to give assurances that the budget set by members is realistic and is specific in the way it will be delivered in terms of potential savings that need to be identified. It's also clear, and the legal officer will provide a bit more detail, that if members do not agree a balanced budget, the Section 151 officer will issue a Section 114 notice. And as I said, the legal officer will say a little bit more around that. We're setting a budget today for going forward next year. It is anticipated that the Chancellor's budget, which will be on the 16th of March, will announce further reductions in local government spending. At this point, we do not know what this will look like, but we do not anticipate this to have any impact on current year. And the final point I was going to make is that the future is important, and it is really crucial that we work with members, government, and the local government association in developing a mid-term financial plan, which will commence very, very shortly. And I'll leave it there for the moment.
Thank you. Mr. Borston is coming next.
Just to pick up very quickly on the point that the Chief Executive made, just with regards to our obligations in terms of setting a balanced budget. There is, of course, a legal obligation to set a balanced budget before the 11th of March in any financial year. In the event that that does not occur, or it appears to the Section 151 officer that there will be a deficit, then of course it is within his remit to issue a Section 114 report, and in terms of the specifics with regard to that, it's in the instances if it appears to him that the expenditure, including proposed expenditure, is likely to exceed the resources, including borrowing available to the council, and he would be under a similar obligation if he became aware of a course of action, if pursued, would be unlawful and likely to cause loss or deficiency on the part of the authority. Of course, in the event a Section 114 report is issued, then there is the possibility, I'm not saying for definite, but there's a possibility of intervention by the Secretary of State at that stage, who may well take the running of the finances out of the hands of the council entirely. As a secondary note to this, there's also provision in the Local Government and Housing Act which would require myself as the monitoring officer to issue a Section 5 report in respect of the ability to set a balanced budget, so it would again be working in conjunction with the 151 officer and the Chief Executive as the Head of Paid Services in this regard.
Thank you. Mr Barrett, are you about to say anything? Or?
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's probably best at this stage to actually take each recommendation in turn.
Thank you.
To move on from there. I reinforce the comments made by Head of Paid Service and our monitoring officer. Have to say it's a course of action I really hope we don't take, because of the severe ramifications not only to us as individuals, to the members, but also to communities and the islands as a whole. So I do hope we can agree on a suitable course of action this morning. So firstly, if I look at the fees and charges, committees have set fees and charges, and the recommendation here is for council to ratify these fees and charges.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Grotty.
Excuse me, Chairman, and my apologies, but can I ask the legal officer something before he goes?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise what... I do beg your pardon, I didn't realise what you... I thought you were trying to attract my attention to speak. I didn't... Sorry. I beg your pardon, Mr Burrison. Councillor Mrs Grotty would like to ask you something before you leave.
Yeah, my apologies, I didn't like to interrupt, and you left us so quickly I couldn't attract your attention. I find this the most concerning meeting of my 3 years as a councillor, and obviously we've got to make some very serious decisions, and they're going to be very difficult ones. However, I would like to ask for Mr Burriston's advice before he leaves us. I have mentioned on Friday to the Chief Finance Officer that I did not feel as a councillor that I had the fine level, the detail, the financial detail to back up some of the decisions that we're making today, especially around the area of savings. And I find that deeply concerning, because I do understand that we must set the budget. However, I would like to ask Mr Burriston what my position is. I feel, quite frankly, in some areas, in quite an untenable position. I want to be a responsible councillor. I want to help us move forward. But I don't feel that I have the detail in front of me to make some of those decisions, especially around the savings area, where some of what we are asked to do seems to conflict with what we've already decided in committee quite recently in my subject area of community services. So I would like to ask him what I do. I'm sorry to use a legal term, but I almost feel that I'm making a decision under duress, and I'm very, very uncomfortable.
Thank you, Councillor Grottick. Ultimately, it is for each individual member to determine their own viewpoint in respect of how they wish to proceed in terms of the budgetary issues. No officer or other member should influence that decision. You'll obviously have your own viewpoint and perspective. The proposals that are being put in front of you by the Section 151 officer and the Chief Executive are those proposals they believe to be prudent in terms of moving forward and to make a rational decision for the future of the authority in terms of the budget and to ensure that we reach a point where there is a balanced budget to take into the next financial year. Of course, it is within your remit as a councillor to determine whether or not you accept those proposals. However, I would urge you to be mindful that they are proposals that are being put forward on a prudent basis and with the view of the 151 officer that will reach a position where we are in a balanced position.
Thank you. Councillor Mr. does that answer your question?
That's helpful. It obviously doesn't negate my dilemma, but I'm grateful to Mr. Barriston for his contribution.
Councillor Billsborough and then Councillor Molson.
Right, Chairman,
Thank you very much.
A small point, Chairman. On page 7 of the report, at the top, 4.1, it says, on the 17th of December 2005. I presume that ought to be 2015. A small point. What worries me, I think I heard the Chief Executives say that the Chancellor of the Exchequer may want further cuts. Is this correct? Soon.
Sorry, forgive me for interrupting, Chairman. With the utmost respect, we seem to have completely abandoned the entire process of taking recommendation 1, fees and charges, and jump straight to the budget. So can we clarify, is that what we're choosing to do? I'm happy to debate either, but that's not what we set out.
I was going to. Councillor Billsborough, we have said that we will deal with recommendation number 1 first.
Okay, right, Chairman.
And distinct from the rest of the process.
Right. So I can talk about fees and charges.
And only that at this time.
Right. Fees and charges. I will not go on over all the fees and charges, but I'll mention 1 or 2. One is the airport fees and charges were approved by the Teddy Committee last week to rise by 15%. That was only carried by 5 votes to 3. Do we have the power today to alter the airport charges? Yes or no?
Not to alter them at this meeting. We have the power to approve or not.
So we have the power to send it back to the committee?
You have that power, yes.
Well, I am going to propose, Chairman, that the 15% is too high, that they were raised, I think, by 25% or so 2 years ago, 10% last year. The continual raising of the airport fees will not cure the problem. The problem has been that people aren't coming here. And I do not think that a 15% rise is prudent. And I was going to recommend that we send them back to committee. If we can't change it now, which I would suggest 5%, if you send back to committee, that's my first right.
Thank you.
My second one is the charges, or the fees and charges. It's on page 9, residential care at Park House. I'm not going to go into figures, but there's one word which really sticks in my gullet. It says, the new service arrangements aim to provide better residential care facility, preferably on the islands, etc. So this leaves the way open, when you say preferably, that we might not have residential care on the islands. It need not be Park House, but I strongly advocate that we must maintain a residential care service on the islands, and I hope you will support me in this.
Councillor Billsborough, as you are very well aware, you raised the same point a few days ago. We had a very, very robust discussion about that at the time, and a vote was taken. Councillors have committed to do their very best in respect of elder care on these islands. There are no absolutes. We cannot say it's all or nothing. We have said that preferably we will strive our utmost to keep the services here. At this point, we cannot say or do more than that, and it was very robustly debated.
Chairman, if I may on that, with all due respect, I disagree with your views on that entirely.
You don't actually know my views on this. I have just told you what has happened.
Happened at Community Services Committee. It's the full council that must decide this and nobody else. And I am proposing that we strike out that word preferably, so it reads residential care facility on the islands, and strike out the word. I propose we strike out the word preferably. It arouses too much fear in people's minds.
Thank you. I'm going to take it in order of the lights, unless you really wish to come in on that point, Councillor Mrs Grotto.
Yes, I do, please, Chair, because I would please ask my councillor colleague.
Hang on, could somebody just let Councillor Mrs Grotto in just to speak on this particular point, and then I'm going back to the order of people putting the light on. If somebody could just turn their light off a second, thank you.
Please, could we revert back to the agreed procedure, which is that we are currently discussing fees and charges. I would like to reply to Councillor Bilsborough, but that will be appropriate when we get to number 3. Right now, if I could just refocus, we are talking about fees and charges, and that will include the fees and charges at Park House. Regretfully, I think we do have to put them up with almost immediate effect, subject to the adult social care manager discussing with affected clients and giving them presumably some time to plan. So that item is appropriately discussed here. The wider issue of the options analysis surely remains with number 3.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Bennett, I think you were next.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask if it's the appropriate moment to follow on from Councillor Bilsborough's comments about the airport charges. No?
Well, we're talking about fees and charges, so I think you had... Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to propose that, as Councillor Bilsborough did, that this matter of airport charges is deferred for now and referred back to the Teddy Committee. It is too important an issue, and indeed it would take many hours to debate meaningfully, and here is not the forum. I would like to suggest that it goes back to Teddy and that the increase is left at 0% in the interim, but that a decision is quickly arrived at following a recommendation by a round table group to be chaired by an independent and objective chairman, and in fact I have mentioned the name of Lord Teverson, who was our former MEP,
right,
and is an expert in economic development and so on. And I think that by that means we would arrive at the best decision and way forward. It is unthinkable that such an important matter is not open to consultation with the transport provider.
Thank you.
There's lots I could say on it, but I will resist.
I'm conscious that we have a long meeting to get through, so if you don't mind.
Yes, me too.
Thank you. Is that Councillor Francis?
Councillor Molson was first.
Councillor Molson.
Yeah, I fully concur with what Councillor Bennett has just said. Unfortunately, due to the rearrangement of the Teddy meeting, I was not able to be there as Vice Chairman. However, I find myself strongly at odds with a 15% rise in fees. This council voted to relinquish the lease on the airport as of September this year. We, as an authority, will glean the vast majority of fees for that airport between now and the relinquishing of that lease. There is likely to be a surplus generated on the current fee basis, let alone an increase. I think we're sending the wrong signals entirely to the community and to our sole provider of transport, the steamship company, by raising this. We have to work with the steamship company, not drive a wedge between this council and the steamship company. They are our only sole provider. We need that improvement, the improvement of the service, to be a collaborative effect, not a confrontative one.
Yes, Councillor O'Neill.
Sorry, I know I'm not in turn, but I just would have thought it was appropriate, if we're going to discuss fees and charges on the airport, surely we should invite the relevant officers back into the debate.
I was going to say, we need Craig Dryden to come back in here, if you don't mind, if we're going to talk. No, but I know, all we are going to do today is not to get into a discussion, but I just want Mr. Dryden, the senior manager, to come back in here to confirm something to me. Sorry.
And just on a point of clarification, Chairman, can I just make clear, as far as my understanding is that we don't have technically necessarily the authority to make any separate recommendations. We simply approve or not approve the recommendation of Teddy. So I'm happy that if it's members' decision for it to go back to Teddy, but that we should be careful that we're not presenting alternative options here.
That is what
that's the remit of Teddy.
That is what I said earlier.
Yeah, no, I just want that for clarification.
Yeah,
that I've started to hear alternative options.
I was about to say, Mr. Dryden, thank you for coming back in. I just want you to hear the end of this conversation. We are not going back to reset fees and charges for the airport at this meeting. There is no question of that. All we can do is either confirm or endorse the decision made at the Teddy meeting, or reject that.
I don't have any fundamental issue with Councillor Bennett's suggestions. It's not appropriate for us to make a decision that there should be a roundtable meeting with or without Lord Jefferson.
Absolutely not.
That should be a decision that's taken
We
by Teddy.
either endorse the decision made at taken at the Teddy meeting, which was, I hasten to add, a properly conducted meeting that was quorate. It's either approve that or not. And the only outcome of that would be for it to go back to another Teddy meeting.
My position is that we don't approve that. I have a long list of objections to a 15% rise, and I think
now is not the time for those.
Fine, I appreciate what you're saying, but I think Mr. Dryden will appreciate that we've had long discussions over this, and he realises my position very, very clearly over this. But I support Councillor Bennett, and I will second the motion that we do not approve the 15% rise, and we send it back to Teddy for further discussions.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Peacock, I think you were next.
Yes, not being a member of Teddy, this is my only opportunity to discuss fees and charges for whatever Teddy brings to us. We are now limiting us to have a discussion for those members that don't go to Teddy. So we just have to go approve of whatever Teddy says without any discussion. And I would like, if we vote to have a further meeting with Teddy, please, however they do it, just to send the results to those members of us that are not members of Teddy.
Councillor Francis, I think you're next.
I would just like to say, quite ironically, I missed the Teddy meeting due to weather problems on Tuesday morning, and sort of highlighting the general issue of the challenges we've got and the requirement to support the transport and transport providers as much as we can, and acknowledge the concerns of the people of the islands, and that their transport provision and their transport costs are one of their most foremost concerns. But I know exactly what's been said. We can't discuss the detail now. I just want to support the fact that we turn down the recommendation and send it back to Teddy. And I understand, by the sounds of things, we'll have to do that relatively quickly. But we will be prepared to do that.
Right.
The members of Teddy. So.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Bennett.
Chairman, I think the council, the full council, is legally empowered to actually overturn the Teddy decision, and, as I suggested, to set an interim charge of 0% increase, which in fact would lead to money income with the projected increase in passengers. So we could do that. We do not have to hold a Teddy committee meeting in the next 2 days, and that indeed would not give sufficient time for the roundtable discussion that should have been held months ago. And I think that I would propose 0% increase now, with a view to possibly a return from the Teddy committee at some time during the financial year. I'm sure it would happen quickly, but I don't think that we are legally empowered to set that charge.
Councillor Mrs. Montford.
Yes, I believe that if it goes back to Teddy, that we'll have to do it in the next 2 days. Is that right? I mean, if we send it back to Teddy without...
Yeah, we can't balance the budget so it has a major impact on balancing the budget.
Yes, I mean, if we do what Councillor Bennett says and set the charges at 0% at the moment, then the whole budget can, provided everyone agrees, can go through. But if people don't agree to that and they want it sent back to Teddy, does that mean that that meeting has to be done within the next 2 days?
If we are to set the budget.
If we are to set the budget before the 11th. Right, and that is not time enough for a consultation with the operators, is it?
No, but we can balance the budget with the recommendation from Teddy now, and at the earliest opportunity we can ask Teddy to review that situation, and we can change fees and charges at the earliest opportunity if that is the wishes of the majority of members. I would also just like to point out that, again, I completely agree with Councillor Bennett that this is such a serious issue that it requires, as I think you said, something along the lines of, hours and hours of discussion. So I'm somewhat confused by the approach that we can choose to effectively ignore what was a fairly lengthy debate by the Teddy Committee on this issue and try and set fees and charges in this committee in sort of 10-15 minutes. It seems entirely illogical to me that we can have less of a debate without the relevant committee whose terms of reference dictate that they set fees and charges. We're going to make the decision based on a shorter debate by full council with a considerable number of members missing. I would have thought that the severity and the need for this to have a full and open and frank debate, I completely endorse, but in order to do that, then I think the best process is to accept the current recommendation of Teddy in order to balance the budget and then choose to review it at the earliest opportunity.
There is also the point that we do have a committee system whereby we elect members to sit on committees, and therefore we have trust in those members to do their job, to read the paperwork, to make decisions and make recommendations to full council. Our members around the table saying they do not trust the members of the Teddy who were at the meeting the other day.
On that issue, I would like to say I completely understand Councillor Peacock's concerns.
Could you put your light on, please?
But I totally trust them.
Yeah, it's flashing green. Can somebody just let Councillor...
Well, I'm in the middle of talking, so I'd rather not. No, I was just going to say I completely understand Councillor Peacock's concerns, but that is the committee structure that we work with. And obviously, for an example, I personally don't sit on the licensing committee, therefore I do not have an opportunity to take part in debates surrounding licensing. That is just the way it is. But I think I completely endorse your wishes that any findings of that committee should be made available and sent immediately to all members of council.
Yep, absolutely.
I just feel that it is such an important decision that all members should at least be able to express their feelings on it.
All members should be able to access the council paperwork in any case.
Yes.
And all members are members of the public who should be able to write their views to that relevant committee before any meeting to ensure that their views are heard.
And certainly that doesn't say that I don't trust the members of Teddy. I do.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Mr Francis.
Can I just have clarity? Are we allowed to, at this point, leave the charges as they are or not? There seems to be some confusion here. I know Councillor O'Neill's suggesting leaving it at the Teddy recommendation, but are we allowed to or not?
If we don't approve, they will stay as they are.
Because I know we've got at least two members of the Teddy committee here that myself and Councillor Molson, who were unavoidably to travel issues not able to be there, that would not have gone with that recommendation. And I would rather see the meeting at the soonest possible juncture, but with the current charges left as they are, rather than put to 50%.
Do you not accept the point about balancing the budget as it stands? Which was a point that was well made around the table.
That's the only concern.
Councillor Mrs Bennett.
Chairman, as a matter of information, the chairman of Teddy was talking at the meeting and proposing an increase of 0%, and I would like to hear the vice chairman's view, because apparently he was consulted
I don't
on that.
think, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Councillor Mrs Bennett, but I don't think that this is the opportunity for that debate now. We either approve or not. If we disapprove of the recommendation, then we cannot set a balanced budget.
Yes, but if we leave it at a 0% increase, that is retaining the status quo, as Councillor Francis
and therefore we shall not be able to balance the budget.
No, you will be able to balance the budget because the projection of increased passengers, I think it came to, I can't remember the figure offhand, but it produced £10,000 or something
With
like
respect,
that.
the projections
So
are hypothetical. We
budget
cannot
must be
balance the
achieved.
budget on a hypothetical. Councillor Molson.
I understand exactly what we're saying about a balanced budget. I would therefore propose that we adjourn this meeting for further discussion so that we can consider the 0% increase and the implications on the budget.
Councillor Daly.
Chairman, is this airport budget not a separate budget, one that we're not supposed to make profit or loss on? And that we could assume that a 0% increase might balance that particular budget. It's not part of our total budget.
Mr Barrett.
Thank you, Chairman and Councillors. The airport is a separate trading account, or treated as such by the authority. The fees and charges were actually kind of predicated against the kind of capital position of that budget to enhance and provide for assets as we replace those throughout their useful life. So it doesn't actually form part of the revenue budget per se, but it does impact on the trading account.
So therefore the argument of balancing the budget and presenting a balanced budget for the council therefore becomes spurious. So we can recommend from this full council a 0% increase, as in rejecting the increase, without it affecting the balanced budget. Is that correct, Mr Barrett?
Yes, Councillor, that is correct in this case, yes.
In that case, I suggest we carry on with the discussion as we've got, as rejecting this airport increase, because it doesn't affect the overall budget.
Councillor Sims.
I would just say that if we freeze it, that is a net real term reduction. So we're actually reducing airport fees this year, in effect, because of inflation. Well,
but didn't we go down that route once before, where we just said, in order to balance the budget, we'll just say there are going to be 1 million more visitors,
we have run
and
it
then they didn't appear?
We have run it on...
It's because we put the charges up, though.
Not entirely necessarily.
We have run it on projected figures before, and they
We
didn't
are
come
not
through.
getting into the detail of the discussion. Can we move on from the detail?
I would suggest that we run with the Teddy recommendations with the proviso, which that we engage with discussions with the sole operator. If they come up with a solution that's acceptable to them and acceptable to the council, that could be amended very quickly. Probably in the next...
We could call a special
That's
Teddy.
what we should do. I think we should run with the 15% and then subject to discussions with the sole operator
We've got a
and revise it.
proposal we have a proposal on the table that has been proposed and seconded that we reject these fees.
Right. Councillor Mrs Mumford.
Could I ask Mr Barrett, please, if we go with the proposal that Councillor Mawson's taken to have a 0 increase at the moment, does that affect our budget? Does it affect the rest of the budget?
It will not affect the budget, but it will not reduce the deficit that we currently have on the trading account.
Right. If we go with the proposal that Teddy made, with the 15% rise, and can we go back to Teddy to re-look at the charges?
Yeah.
Yes.
They can?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, but I'm thinking about now. I want to know how to vote now.
Right, can I say I'll take Councillor Billsborough and Councillor O'Neill.
Airport, either to a new operator or the Duchy. We must think of that.
Yeah, I would like to remind everybody present that we would, in the ideal circumstances, hand over the airport. However, we have always said that we would not hand over the airport, the lease, unless we were fully satisfied about the body that was going to take it. We have no intention to leave the community in the lurch and just walk away from the airport without so much as buy your leave. That is really important for people to understand. There is no question that this council is abandoning the airport without a satisfactory organisation to run it in place. Okay, I had said I was going to take the vote now. Is this material, Councillor?
I would like to make another proposal.
Well, first of
Or
all...
would you take...
First of all, I have to take...
Councillor Molson.
I think we can hear your proposal, but then I'm going to take the one that's proposed in second.
I would like to propose that we go ahead to approve the fees and charges as they are with the 15% increase, and then it can go back to Teddy if anybody wants to, and they can have consultation just to keep the budget as it is.
Right, thank you. Second by Councillor Simmons. First and foremost, we're going to vote on Councillor Molson's recommendation that was seconded by Councillor Mrs Bennett, or was it the other way around? I'm sorry if I've got that the wrong order. Well, proposed by Councillor Mrs Bennett, seconded by Councillor Molson. Could you repeat the proposal?
That we reject the increase and leave it at 0 and refer it back to Teddy.
Okay. Those in favour of rejecting the increase and referring the matter back to Teddy, please show clearly. Okay, thank you. Those against, please show clearly. 3, 4.
Sorry, could you show clearly? Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, that's carried, so we can't take your proposal. Thank you. Right. Thank you, Mr. Dryden. Right. Moving on with the rest of recommendation 1. Please, may I know your thoughts on the rest of the fees and charges?
Can I, Chairman, then just discuss one aspect of fees and charges that I've had problems over, and I've had representation about it. This is regarding Teddy, disposal of waste, etc. As we're at this point,
within the budget year 16-17.
It is in the budget, yes. It's in the Teddy budget, and all it is this: when you go down to the waste disposal area and you take a tin of paint, they charge you £25 if it's classed as commercial waste. So if somebody takes down a tin in their own car, it's free. If they have a carrier to take it down, it costs £25. What puzzles me, Chairman, it's not been well thought through at all, this can of paint. Is it a can of paint like that? Or is it one of those? No, Chairman, it's not defined, and this is why I don't have any faith in the list of waste disposal charges. We talk about tyres, etc. I cannot, having seen that, I cannot have any faith in the waste disposal charges.
Councillor Bilsborough.
Quite simple.
Councillor Bilsborough, thank you very much for bringing the props. However, I think if you were able to carry them all the way from Ramsey Valley to here, you could have probably carried them all the way to Morwell, and therefore there wouldn't have been any charges incurred.
I put them on a trolley, a hand trolley, Chairman.
My point is the same. Thank you. Right. Are there any more comments? If not, may I know your wishes on recommendation number 1? Mr. Barrett.
Sorry, Chairman, there was one correction following the FAS committee last Tuesday on page 29, bottom of page time, bottom item sorry, page 29, bottom item, excuse me. The sale of the edited register of electors, that was amended in the committee to increase to £250 rather than £230. Otherwise than that, they are complete.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, may I know your wishes? Councillor Mrs Mumford.
I would like to propose recommendation 1.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor Daly. Those in favour, please show. Please show clearly.
Sorry, is Councillor Goodrick holding a hand up?
Yes, she is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11, yeah. Yep, thank you. Those against, please show. That's 1. Thank you. With a recorded vote for Councillor Billsborough. Those abstaining, please show. No, thank you. Thank you. I'm sure you'll enjoy carrying the cans home again. Recommendation 2. That members approve the revenue and capital budget estimates as presented to committees for the 2016-17 financial year and beyond. Councillor Mrs Gottlieb.
Thank you, Chairman. As we proceed, can I just be assured that as these are financial decisions, all of our votes are recorded as we move through the recommendations?
Thank you. And I do think we need to amend that recommendation and delete the last 2 years. The last 2 words. I apologise.
If we could delete the last quarter of an hour, that would be nice, Chairman.
I.e. that I suggest that recommendation 2 reads that members approve the revenue and capital budget estimates as presented to the committees for the financial years 2016/17. No, I'm suggesting that we delete that at the present because I have already mentioned that I think we should have a finance workshop to discuss the beyond. Councillor Mrs Mumford, were you about to put your light on? No? Okay, sorry. I thought you were hovering over the button. Mr Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I feel it would be beneficial to actually take items 2 and 3, recommendations 2 and 3, because without recommendation 3, the revenue budget cannot be reconciled.
Yep. Are members happy with that? Yes, in that case we are discussing items 2 and 3.
Chairman.
Councillor Daly.
I'd like to talk under item 3, I think. And that's looking at this table of reductions to the budget. And I'm looking at the second one, which is active silly, on page 8, active silly alternative delivery model. Now, I would like to propose that we decide to have an alternative delivery model. The islands of Tresco, St Agnes, Briar and St Martin's all have community halls which don't appear anywhere in this budget. And I don't see why St Mary's needs to have money from the council. I think this hall on St Mary's should be handed over to a community committee to run with fundraising and volunteer effort so that we remove the island St Mary's Hall from our budget entirely.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Daly, what are you actually referring to? The sports hall?
Yes, the one on St Mary's.
Oh, right.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Grotty.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't disagree with Councillor Daly that we should be looking at this. In fact, I have wide concerns over the whole of this savings plan. I don't believe councillors actually did present specific options. I think we felt that we had to choose move forward very quickly, and I feel very pressured. However, I don't actually have a problem with this particular area in the sense that we should be looking at service delivery in this area. But we're talking people's jobs here. We're talking people who must be very concerned when they hear in chamber that we're looking at all of this. And it doesn't seem to me an unreasonable time frame that we're going to have a plan by October 16. And so I would respectfully suggest to my colleague that while agreeing that we should move forward, we shouldn't make any immediate decision on this particular area of service delivery. Surely we need time to evaluate all the options.
Thank you. I am sure that every member of council recognises that we are talking about individuals and their livelihoods, their jobs. But I would make the point that this is true of every single authority throughout the land, probably throughout the world if we did but know. We remember the pain felt by Birmingham with the people that they had to lay off. It is unfortunate to have to reduce services, to run the risk of laying off people. We know that. It is a question of the economic survival of this authority. We have to take hard decisions. There is no alternative. It is doubly difficult in Scilly because these people are our friends, our neighbours, our relatives in some cases. But nonetheless, we have to make certain decisions. Councillor Mrs Mumford.
Yes, particularly I would like to talk about the children's services. There's a recommend saving of 50,000. Will we have the chance before any cuts are made to see what cuts are recommended to be made? They're not just going to be done without us knowing.
As I said, we will be having a finance workshop on this very subject as soon as I can reasonably, with due acknowledgement of the problems of off islanders, as soon as I can get it in.
That's all that I wanted to know.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Mawson.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask the Chief Executive a question. Is that I've gone through all of these recommendations here. I'm from a perspective of running my own business for a lot of years, more years than I care to actually remember, is that I just wonder whether these cuts are imminently achievable. There are some large figures there that, in my opinion, will only be able to be achieved over a phased-in period. Therefore, does that mean to say that if what I am saying is correct, we are going to miss the budget at the end of the next financial year?
Thank you, Councillor Molson. Clearly, it is going to be difficult. The way that the figures have been arrived at are based on the fact that the savings will be implemented as soon as possible, ideally within a year, of course, because they need to be delivered by the end of this financial year. If these savings are not delivered before the end of the next financial year, then clearly there will be further draws on reserves.
Okay. Can I just come back on that?
Okay.
Is the fact, does that...
Yeah, could somebody let...
So what we are actually voting on is something that may be achieved or may not be achieved. It's not a definite at all. So there is a consequence that at the end of this next financial year that we're talking about now, there could still be a considerable overspend. Is that correct?
The plans are made on the basis that it will be delivered during the financial year 16-17.
You understand my concern is that, is this deliverable is what I'm actually asking?
I think it will be deliverable. Yeah.
So there's no definite yes or no then?
Well, we put all the resources and effort into delivering the plan as agreed by members to deliver this by the end of the financial year.
So I take from the fact that you're not giving me a definite yes or no, you have concerns over whether it's achievable then?
I don't have concerns at that moment, but clearly we will work to delivering this plan because that is required to deliver a balanced budget at the end of the next financial year. Also, we know there will be further requirements for savings in next financial year. So therefore, further savings...
That was the lead-on question, is the fact that you obviously have got concerns as to whether this is 100% deliverable, because you will not answer yes or no to the question that I'm asking. Therefore, if we don't deliver in the next financial year, next year's cuts are going to be even more swinging, correct?
If it's not delivered, correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
These are, I mean, if you read 7.2, it refers to the section 151 officer statement, where it says that the opinion is that I can give an opinion that the 2016-17 budget, if associated with the cost savings plan in 4.10, is based on robust budget estimates. I think that says it all. It is very carefully written, that. We are doing our best to balance the budget, to make savings that we can use as solid foundations for the future. However, please remember that this is also going to be, as members know from our workshops, based on conversations with government and making a case for them. This is why the figures for the forthcoming years are provisional, because we do have meetings in prospective meetings to argue our case, to show what we have done, to show the difficulties within, and to find a way forward. Those conversations are urgent, probably as urgent as anything else we've ever undertaken. Government will work with us if... Sorry, are you... Yeah. No, I just wondered if you're actually listening. You know, if we show that we are serious in what we're doing. Did you wish to reply to that?
Yeah. My concerns are very, very deep as far as the delivery as this is concerned, and you've touched on one of the concerns that I was talking about, is the fact that if we don't deliver in this next period, is the local government office then going to turn around and say to us that you are inept at what you're doing, and then pull the rug even further from under our feet?
It's not a question of being inept, it's whether we can meet the challenges. And for that, we do need member support. Without member support, then it would be, you know, I don't like the word inept, because that suggests that we're acting without giving things due thought and consideration, which isn't the case. This, terrible cliche, but it's got to be a team effort if we're going to get this right. There are serious decisions to be made. And I cannot say enough, they're not just our council, our authority facing them, it is across the country. You know, anybody who reads the papers, reads the news, reads the LGA broadsheets, knows exactly what our colleagues are going through too. It isn't just us. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of comments, really. Firstly, thank you very much for removing the and beyond from the recommendation, because that is a huge area of concern, which makes it a lot more palatable in its current format. So again, thank you for that. My main concern, respectfully, is that I don't think the rest of the action plan actually goes far enough. I don't think it's an entirely accurate reflection of members' wishes from the workshops that we had leading up to this meeting. I think it paints only half of a picture. I think there are huge areas for concern that are not even touched upon, not mentioned in this action plan. So without any kind of assurances that those areas, as per the requests of the majority of members of this council, are addressed immediately, I also think that whilst it wouldn't be an accurate reflection of members' wishes, I also think that the public perception of that, to be addressing the possibilities of cutting frontline services whilst not addressing some significant elephants in the town hall, as it were, would be entirely inappropriate. However, I must say, I understand the current situation with regards to the necessity for balancing the budget. I fully appreciate all the hard work that's gone into this document, particularly from the Finance Department, and time is of the issue. But I'm uncomfortable supporting the document. I will, with planned savings removed, but I will support the document on the understanding that all of the unmentioned areas that have been expressed as a concern for this council are addressed at the soonest opportunity.
Yeah. Members should note that there will be more savings to be found in the next year in any case, and I'm sure most of those will come under that category in any case. It will be phased in, but as I have said before, we will have a specific financial workshop to go through this, right, to reassure members.
Yes, but respectfully, Chairman, we already had two of those, and this does not accurately reflect that.
Fine. Councillor Bilsborough.
I take on board what Councillor O'Neill said. My problem is, I think, like us all, we see we've got to make £672,000 cuts this year. I cannot support something until I've seen a breakdown of this. Now, I know we're going to have a workshop and have a look at it. Workshops are not binding, and we may discover that we can do it. On the other hand, we may discover that we can't without imposing unacceptable cuts on the community, because it's not just this year. Next year, it's £860,000. I would hope that if we honestly find we can't achieve this without pain in the community, then it's up to us, you and the Chief Exec and others, to go to the government and say, argue the case, say, look, try as we might, we cannot do it. I cannot put my...
Councillor Bilsborough, I think I've already told you that those conversations are in the pipeline. We are trying our very, very best to make the case for silly.
I don't doubt that, Chairman, but I cannot vote for this now because I'm voting for an unknown.
Thank you.
Can I come back, because Councillor Bilsborough did specifically relate to my comments, so I just need to come back on that for clarification. I may be wrong, but I'm under the impression that regarding specific cuts, this is an action plan. With regard to specific cuts, each one of those would have to come back to the relevant committee and be approved.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so that would give members the opportunity to say, well, actually, you know, I can't endorse that specific course of action, or I can get behind this one.
That's how it works.
I think this is just endorsing a kind of broad brush action plan in order to get where we need to be. So that I'm comfortable with.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Daly, I think your light's been on for a while.
Chairman, all these cuts that are going to go forward will probably involve reduction in staff, because that is where our biggest sum of money is spent. So we can't do this in a pain-free manner. As you said, we're going to have to make painful decisions. And I take that very seriously. And I have made a proposal, and it's that we remove the sports hall from our budgets, and that they have to be freestanding if they're to continue. And so if there is a seconder for that, I would like to take a vote on it.
Is there a seconder for Councillor Daly's recommendation?
Sorry, Chairman, I'm not prepared to second it, but I'm just slightly confused because it does say in the document under 4.10 how the action plan is an alternative delivery model for Active Silly. How will this be implemented? At the bottom it says a possible transfer to new operating company will be investigated. At this stage, surely the investigation to establish whether or not that is actually achievable is the only logical...
Yes, but I can't stop Councillor Daly making his...
Absolutely, and I can't stop myself from not seconding that proposal on the grounds that it's already incorporated into the existing document.
Councillor Daly.
Yes, Chairman. We could go over this again. We went over it step by step in workshops in the last few weeks and months, and in our corporate plan. And if we investigated this situation with the sports hall and found that we couldn't do anything with it, we'd then be saddled with carrying on paying out for it.
Well,
and I don't think we can afford to carry on paying out for it.
Could I ask Councillor Daly a question? Does this, because it's active, does this include the swimming pool as well? Or is it just the sports hall?
Sports hall.
That's all right, thank you. Councillor Francis.
Yeah, I would broadly like to support pretty much everything Councillor O'Neill said, and to just clarify that we are having, you know, as you said yourself, Chairman, further workshops to actually quantify the minutiae of all of this. It's most important for me that I think the key element that Councillor O'Neill mentioned was that it doesn't go far enough in certain areas. We at this point now have an opportunity, and we are at a bit of a crossroad. Obviously we need to work with the government, as you've said, to try and help us to make savings where needed. And it's going to be very important for me in these forthcoming workshops that we're going to hold to look, as we all know, very, very carefully at the bureaucracy and the clerical side. And for me, I think I know in my own heart from some of the feedback that I'm getting, as we all are, from members of the community, that is the side that they want to see addressed most vigorously in terms of cuts that may need to be made. We are looking at putting up council taxes, we're looking at putting up all sorts of charges. And I think we probably won't make it as far as Councillor Mumford's newsagents if we do that without addressing some of the bureaucratic elements. And I do not feel at this stage, I will support it due to the timescale, but it doesn't go far enough in certain of those areas.
It is imperative on every councillor, every member of every committee and every chairman of committee to find as many savings as possible. This is a minimum of savings to be made. If we can make more savings, then we should be doing that. We should be trying to do that in any case. Okay. The Chief Executive is drawing my attention to 4.13 on that one, but you've got that in front of you on page 10. Councillor Mrs. Grottick.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry to come back, but I would just like to say I'm very reassured by the fact that all of these, including presumably the second mini restructure that we seem to be having, will come back, obviously, for further discussion. However, what I would say is I cannot support this, and I would like to, unless we amend the wording in the residential care piece. We have just discussed fully at Community Services Committee the fact that we will go for a full options analysis to look at all the ways in which we could deliver residential care and other facilities within the adult social care area to the most vulnerable of our communities. I would like to propose that after phased introduction of new service arrangements, the wording is then deleted down to at the end of nursing care provision and replaced by phased introduction of new service arrangements following on from a full options analysis and further discussion and sanction from members. Because it seems to me that we are second guessing what the full analysis is actually going to say. One of which, of course, as our Vice Chair reminded us the other day in a meeting, is in fact to do nothing. Yeah, and here we have already decided apparently we're going to have new service arrangements.
Can I just say for clarification, I don't actually sit on that committee meeting, but I did attend that meeting as a member of the public, and it was my understanding that a full options analysis was the
we've already agreed that.
Forward. Yeah, but I think what Councillor Grottick is saying, that doesn't seem to be accurately reflected in the implementation plan of this document, so I'm happy to second that proposal.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, shall we take a vote on that then? It's been proposed and seconded that we amend the wording. Those in favour?
Chairman, just to clarify this, is Councillor Mrs. Grottick still leaving in the possibility there will be no residential care on the islands? Yes or no?
Options analysis.
It's a full options analysis.
I'll have one person at once, please.
My personal view is that some form of residential care on this island is absolutely necessary. However, as I explained, I hope quite carefully to you the other day, Councillor Billsborough, a full options analysis does exactly what it says on the tin. You cannot ask someone to have a full options analysis and then not allow them to look at all the options, however unpalatable. In fact, as I have explained to you as well, both at the meeting and privately, you need that options analysis to explain sometimes why you cannot do something, as well as why you might find it the best way forward.
Chairman,
Councillor Billsborough.
Chairman, really, I can't accept this. The possibility, any possibility of taking away residential care on this island, it would be over my dead body. Some might wish this, but anyway.
Councillor Billsborough, this is the price and the cost of democracy. We are proceeding with a full options analysis. That has been agreed by a committee of this council. That is what will happen. Now, Councillor Mrs. Grottick has proposed and been seconded that we amend the wording to include that. Let's just get on with this because we've got a long way to go. Those in favour of the amended wording, please show clearly. Thank you, that's right. Those against, please show clearly.
I'm going to abstain.
All right, those abstaining. And we've got a recorded abstention on the part of Councillor Billsborough. Thank you very much. Right, now can we go back to the recommendations that we're discussing? Councillor Mrs. Mumford.
I would like to propose recommendations. Are we taking the two together, 2
yes,
and
please.
3?
2 and 3 together.
Please. think discussion's gone on long enough.
I will happily I will second that recond.
Right.
Preferably, if Councillor Mumford is happy, with the addition of those two of the condition. Now, I don't need a second condition because we've already removed and beyond from the recommendation, but with the condition that all other areas across this authority are looked at in detail at the earliest available opportunity to find any other savings.
In any case, that is happening, but if it makes you
Yes,
feel
but
happy
it doesn't
to put it
say
in the
that in this
recommendation,
document.
fine.
I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah, we can add that. Councillor Mrs. Grotty.
Chairman, does that mean, although we are in the middle of a very long and complicated meeting, that we are not going to discuss further items within the capital budget? For example, the Smart Islands and the fact that it is apparently going to cost us £600,000 to demolish Carn Thomas. I'm afraid I do think we ought to discuss that in some depth.
I would also think we ought to look at this business in the next 3 years of spending £4 million on electric vehicles, etc., and PowerPoints.
Councillor Billsborough, nobody is intending to spend £4 million on electric vehicles.
I did say, Chairman, and all the other things on the end of that, on that item, it's £4 million.
Thank you.
It's grant, I know, but it's public money.
Councillor Mrs. Grotty, do you wish to add to your point that you just made?
Yes, Chairman, I understood we were going to discuss the budget in some depth. I understand that Mrs. Mumford wishes to move forward, but at this moment in time, surely we need further discussion on the capital budget.
Well, would you like to make your point then? Because we've had a proposal and seconded, but I'm
Yeah, but
happy
if
for you
Councillor
to make...
Mumford is happy, as seconding the proposal with the condition, I'm happy to delay taking a vote, if that's your decision to take, Chairman, until we continue through the debate. I have no objections to that.
Councillor
and
O'Neill.
happy to
That is
leave the
what I'm
seconding
trying to
stand.
explain to Councillor Mrs. Grotty. Would
Thank
you like to make your point?
Perhaps we could split the recommendation. Could we agree the actions proposed in paragraph 410, which we seem to have discussed in some depth, in order that we might move forward, and then could we go back, although we were discussing it together, could we just at the moment take a vote on option 3?
Right. In the interest of moving this forward, and against the request of the senior manager, let's take item 3, recommendation 3. It's been
I'm under the impression that Councillor Mumford is happy to amend the proposal to fit that requirement.
Yeah, are you happy?
And I'm happy
And
I'm happy to second that.
Right, thank you. Proposed and seconded for item 3. Those in favour, please show clearly.
Chairman, I'm not sure what you're calling number 3.
Councillor Mrs. Grotty has asked me to split recommendation 2 and 3, and that we just take a vote on recommendation number 3 at this time, because she wishes to come back on recommendation number 2. At least that's what
The action plan in 410 with the condition that the other areas across the authority are addressed.
And with my amendment, please.
And with the amendment.
Are you clear on that, Councillor Daly? Right? Okay, unless anybody else has any doubts, let's take recommendation number 3. It's been proposed and seconded. Those in favour, please show clearly. Right. Those against? 1. Those abstaining? Nobody? That's it. Thank you very much. So that is carried. So we'll return to recommendation number 2. Councillor Mrs. Grotty. No, but you're the person who's asking us to revisit this, so I assumed you wanted to talk about it.
I find various items in the budget concerning, and I would just like some more clarification, especially on the item in the capital budget for the £4 million on the Smart Islands project. I have no doubt the Smart Islands might have a lot to offer. However, to be sitting at a meeting when we are discussing cutting service delivery at the same time as spending nearly £4 million on what admittedly possibly 80% to 100% grant funded seems to me quite difficult. If we are only funded with 80%, then 20% of 4 million is 800,000. Where are we going to find that 800,000 from? I would also like to point out that procurement is an expensive exercise. We spent I looked back, 111,000 in the procurement charges to actually get the grant funding for the Porthmelon Innovation Centre, which I have to say at the moment is largely untenanted. Hopefully it will be tenanted in the future. So it seems to me that having this as a capital, accepting it into the capital budget actually means that we approve spending this amount of money on that kind of an item. I have to say, I freely admit I don't know enough about Smart Islands. We were promised a workshop. We haven't had it. Councillor Bilsborough was reprimanded for saying it was just electric vehicles and charging points. But with respect, that's all the budget says, electric vehicles and charging points. We're not told about all the other aspects, which Mrs Monpeloki explained at my chairman's brief the other day for community services. It apparently includes items to do with the supply of electricity and other wider issues, which may or may not be beneficial. I don't feel that I've got the information at my fingertips at the moment to make a decision on this particular item. I need more information. Secondly, the £600,000 for the demolition of Carn Thomas. The last time I remember discussing the demolition of Carn Thomas, we were told that we would sell the ex-chief executive's house, buy another property for the general fund, totally agree with that, and about £75,000 would then go towards the demolition of Carn Thomas. I'd like to please ask somebody to explain to me how we've gone from 75,000 to 600,000. Seems quite a big anomaly. Thank you.
I will second that, Chairman. I can't add to it. I think my colleague has covered all the points.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Can I just take your points in order? You asked... the reason that I expect Councillor Bilsborough to understand about the fact that it's more than electric vehicles and charging points is the fact that the Smart Islands policies have grown out of the work that was passed under his chairmanship of Planning and Economic Development in 2007, when it was decided by his committee that we would be looking at alternative forms of energy. So I do expect Councillor Bilsborough to know a lot more about it. It is indeed very regrettable that we have not yet had the promised workshop. That is a fact. It is, however, in the diary.
Yesterday, yes, we were offered 2 workshops, one of which incidentally clashes with another meeting, but be that as it may, I'm sure we can sort that.
Well, in that case, I'm sure if you flag that up to the, we'll get that sorted.
I have done so, yes. And I'm grateful for that, but the fact still remains that was only yesterday. When we had these papers in front of us, we did not have the information necessary to make an informed decision. And that puts councillors like myself in a very vulnerable position. I feel deeply uncomfortable making these kind of decisions based on the information. I accept, perhaps I should have done further research myself. I'm not on that particular committee, but I still remain deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I have to revisit my earlier points about we have to have trust in the committees and the work they're doing. But all council minutes and documents are available to all members and generally to the public if they're not excluded items.
Chairman, I took your advice. I went to speak to other members of the Teddy Committee. Admittedly, I couldn't contact the chairman. I couldn't find a single member of the Teddy Committee that could tell me very much about Smart Islands.
Well, that is a terrible indictment. I'm sorry.
You never asked me, though.
I beg your pardon?
You didn't ask me about it, I don't think.
No, I must admit I didn't ask you because...
nor Councillor McCarthy, presumably because he's ill, he would certainly be able to give you a great deal of information.
I accept that. I didn't think it was appropriate to consult with Councillor McCarthy.
No, I'm sure, and that's...
I had a small amount of discussion with you the other evening, Councillor Sims, but
nonetheless, it is not true to say that all members of Teddy don't know anything about it, when indeed quite a lot of them have been working on this for a very long time.
Can I just make a small point? It's my understanding that there is no capital liability whatsoever for the council with any of the Smart Islands projects. They're all funded either by LEP or the partners involved in it. There's no capital outlay for the council.
Excuse me, if Mr. Harper says we've only received...
Could somebody let... so Councillor Mrs Grottick can speak with her light on because it was flashing.
Thank you. If, as I asked Mrs Monpeloki, how much the council, what the financial situation was, she said in an email to all councillors the other day, we might receive 80 to 100% of grant funding. That leaves us 20%. 20% of 4 million, please correct my maths if I'm wrong, is 800,000. How do we find the 800,000?
Would members prefer it if I asked Mrs Montpelloki to return to the room? I'm not really comfortable with us quoting people who aren't present.
I'm sorry, I'm only just, I'm not asking, all I'm saying is the information that was given in an email to all
hang on a second,
councillors.
you just said, are members happy for that? I personally wouldn't be happy for that at this stage in the
Oh,
conversation.
well, I only mean in the sense that if people are being quoted, they're not here to agree with how they're being quoted.
Excuse me, Chairman, I'm just quoting from an email that Mrs Montpelloki sent to all colleagues. I'm sure if there's any problem with what I'm quoting, colleagues will correct me. I'm quite happy for them to do so. Would Councillor would Councillor Molson perhaps give us an update on what how much depth has Councillor Molson had as Vice Chair of the Teddy Committee into the Smart Islands project, please?
I understand entirely your concerns of what you're saying, and I've got concerns likewise is the fact that if it's 100% funded, I haven't got a problem with it at all. The Smart Islands project will, if delivered, bring great benefits to these islands as far as economics is concerned and the development of society and the infrastructure and the economic development of the islands. However, my concern is that if we don't get 100% funding, is that we can't afford it. It's as simple as that. Now, Councillor Sims has just said, and I'm sorry, Steve, you can't guarantee that we're going to get 100% funding for it.
I say it's my understanding. I'm not saying it definitively.
And we do have to fit in with the government agenda because we need the support of government. This is indeed, whether one likes it or not, this is a keynote of what the government is trying to achieve. The Chief Executive is asking to give some information.
Just as a matter for clarity really, is the capital programme is an indicative programme as it sets out in the paper, and it gives the direction of the kind of investments coming forward. Like with any investment that this council makes, it will come to the relevant committee in two ways. Firstly, whether members are content that this council will apply for certain grants, and secondly, if and when there is a requirement for resources from this council to invest in those activities, that will need to be approved by members. So by voting the capital programme is not a vote to commit spending on those items yet. That will come through the normal committee structure for full approval.
Yeah, but sorry, to interrupt, but just specifically on that point, I would like some assurances that what we don't end up, even if we were to approve it in theory, in principle, today, we do often find ourselves in a situation in committee whereby we are told and presented with a statement of fact, as in this would go somewhere along the lines of, this has already been fully supported and endorsed by full council.
Well, then it's
so
up to
whilst
members.
it would be up to that committee to make the final decision, we would be presented with it in a fashion that it was a fait accompli.
It is up to
by our own
members.
decision.
It is up to members to be very robust in such matters then.
Members will agree the programme, not the actual spend.
Yep.
Spend
Okay,
today, yeah.
I'm conscious that we've got to keep our remarks quite concise. I don't want to stifle debate, but the morning is moving on. Councillor Francis.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on a couple of Councillor Grottick's point. Well, obviously what we're discussing at the moment are two things. The Smart Islands project and the potential cost of knocking down the old school. The main point I'd like to make, and I can make it concise, is that my concerns earlier about the bureaucratic and the clerical side being attacked, procurement and how we spend our money is also a massive issue, not only for this council, but probably every council. And it's one of my limited experience looking at the public sector and the way it works, very similar to the crazy figures that we saw in the HOSC meeting for the pages the other day that I mentioned. It is a massive weakness. And let me just tell you that various other, one or two other interests I have on the mainland, we have just knocked down a larger site than the school building here, community centre in Mitcham in London, at a cost of about 75 to 85,000. It is quite incredible that we've managed to arrive at a cost of 600,000, if that's the case, for knocking that site down. And much like the example that we had with improving the pages system on St Agnes the other day, procurement is going to be a huge issue if we want to save money.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask the Chief Executive to comment on that because it comes back on Councillor Mrs Grottick's point as well.
Yeah, with regards to procurement, the to be frank, we are using public money. We are a public body, and therefore we are governed by the law in terms of public procurement. It's public procurement regulation. And therefore we will have to comply to that, otherwise we act illegally.
I know what you're going to say.
With regards to the cost, there's an indicative cost of the demolition of the Count Thomas building. This was presented to previous committees, that the cost would be in the region of 550 or 600,000, and members agreed to then proceed with that project. We have not gone out to procurement yet to get the final figures for that, but that is a ballpark figure in terms of moving forward.
Then perhaps I accept those points and would suggest that one of the most fundamental parts of our negotiation with government should be, if they are willing to work with us and support us, the constraints of our procurement and allow us to be far more cost effective and far more efficient. And that would for me be a very, very important part of these negotiations with government, if these constraints, as you suggest, often force us to be very inefficient in the way we procure.
Thank you. With regards to the reinvestment of monies raised on properties sold, I thought that was going towards the cost of demolition. Yeah. I didn't think it was supposed to represent the whole figure.
Right.
No, I fully understand that, but this 600,000 is coming from reserves, and it isn't clearly marked, unless I've missed it, which reserve it's coming from. Mm-hmm. So, whereas before we had contributed, and I rather naively thought if anyone tended to do the building work and got the contract, that would be included within their tendering document, it seemed to me that we've got to find another 525 that we hadn't found before from a reserve. Perhaps Mr. Barrett would like to tell me which reserve.
Can I clarify that? I fully accept your point that when the property was sold, there was an agreement to use an amount of that sales value, if you like, for the demolition of Count Thomas. But clearly, when a property is sold, that reserve money goes into reserves as a paper exercise, and then will be taken out again to pay or to contribute to that activity.
Yes, we actually did vote that it went to a housing.
Correct.
Indeed. As I was just explaining to the Chair, my understanding was that we were going to offer the 75,000 towards, and then whichever builder, whichever firm picked up the contract for the development of Count Thomas would absorb the rest of the demolition costs in the overall costings. Now we have to find 600,000, or an extra 525. Can I ask Mr. Barrett which reserve he's planning on taking the 525,000 from?
Housing.
Yeah, housing.
I am unsure at this moment, but it would be likely to be housing reserve.
Fine, I just wanted clarification.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
But I can't be 100% certain, but the most likely...
It is a very large sum of money.
Which we will endeavour to whittle down as much as possible.
Yeah. And can I just remind members, it's an indicative sum, and all these sums, as our Chief Executive said, are indicative. We are currently undergoing quite a large-scale transformation of our capital processes. My colleague Joseph has spoken to you earlier. We are adopting the Treasury's Green Book approach to business cases so that we can consistently review capital projects across the authority. So there's a set of gateways for challenge on these, and the relevant committee is essentially the end point of that challenge. So as our Chief Executive said, these are indicative. When the actual schemes come into play, you'll be requested that they initiate, and you'll be involved in the business case approach to be able to challenge and ensure that they are what the islands need and the costs are accurate and do not impact revenue.
Thank you. I'm totally supportive, by the way, of the hopefully assisted homes project at Count Thomas.
Thank you. Councillor Daly.
Chairman, with grants for capital projects, we have to rid ourselves of the idea that even if we get 100% grant for that, that's not the end of the story. That's what's happened with the sports hall. We've said we've got it as a free gift, but it's a huge drain on our revenue resources, and that will happen with other projects as well. Just one that we're currently talking about, the electric vehicle one. Even if we got everything free, we're still going to have quite a revenue account. So please let's not jump into spending money on things which appear to be free.
Yeah, thank you very much. Councillor O'Neill and then Councillor Mawson.
Thank you. I was actually going to say very much the same thing as Councillor Daly on that issue. I think we've got a couple of points here. One is that the Chief Exec has already stated that this is public money we're talking about. Even if it is 100% funded, which I find hard to believe, and as Councillor Daly has pointed out, that's never the end of the story. Show me another single project on the islands where that's been the case. I don't think there is one. There's no such thing as a free lunch. This is public money. Somebody's paying for it. Somebody's got to pay for it. Now, going back to the earlier discussion about addressing the wider issue right the way across the authority, and this ties in with whether or not we have any information regarding smart islands. I have nothing against the concept of smart island technology in principle. I think possibly in the current economic climate, it's a luxury that we can't afford. Now, that might not be entirely true, but I think that's going to be the public perception. It's also my understanding at the moment, and that is based on the fact that I don't agree that we've had no information as members about smart islands, but I don't think we've had enough to be able to make this decision. And we do have a workshop coming up, but we're being asked to make decisions before the workshop. And that's very difficult. So currently, with the level of information we have, it is my belief and my understanding, and I think the majority of the public would agree with me on this one, that it is, whilst it's a great idea in principle, it is a luxury that we can't currently afford. We cannot seriously, as an authority, be looking at cutting frontline services whilst potentially funding 20% of a massive project that the majority of the public are going to see as totally unnecessary. Now, you can convince me of that's not the case, but until then, very difficult.
Councillor Mawson.
I fully support with what Councillor O'Neill has just said, and would just like to add one or two minor bits to that, is the fact that of the appropriateness of capital projects within the environment. We, as an island, generate 85% plus of our income through tourism. There is a perception amongst the public that the council are almost anti-tourism and that we are not developing tourism to a sufficient degree to encourage and promote and grow that business. Whilst I'm not against smart islands and whatever, it may help on the margins. However, it is not a direct benefit to the tourist economy of these islands. And I think any capital project ought to be directed, if we can get the money, towards supporting the current community and developing the businesses that we have got now.
With respect, do you not think that more sustainable energy supplies and cheaper energy supplies would benefit everybody?
I didn't say that. I said it would support, if you listen to what I actually said, Chairman, is that I said it would support it on the fringes. It's not a direct support to the major industries of these islands.
And not if the money that we save from smart island technology ends up paying the electricity bill at the Pi Centre. Potentially.
Councillor Francis.
I entirely agree with Councillor O'Neill and Molson, really. I think that there is the difficult political issue of this. It's the fact that in the environment of having to make the cuts and having to be tight, we've got this project on the line. We don't want to make a mistake similar to the mistakes surrounding the route partnership scenario, where there's some grant money there, there's some capital investment money there, and we just turn it down necessarily through political reasons, but at the same time, this is absolutely not a priority, I don't think, for the people of these islands at the moment, and certainly not in the short term. They're far more concerned with the provision of our transport, as we mentioned earlier, and other far more important issues surrounding the current economy of the island. And that is the difficulty I feel with this, when we're making all these big decisions, how it's going to be perceived by the community. And I think we've lost sight a little bit of the community's perception of the way we operate. And I think within this, all the changes and all of the cuts and everything we need to do now, the culture, I think, of the way that the council's operating can be looked at within and alongside the financial side.
Councillor Mrs. Gotti.
Thank you. It's not just a question of money, it's a question of officer time and officer focus. And I would prefer the time spent researching smart islands, however valuable it might be in the future, to be spent trying to support the community now and the businesses, as Councillor Molson said, that are with us now. So I would like to respectfully ask if Councillor O'Neill and Councillor Molson would like to make a formal proposal to remove the Smart Islands part of the capital budget and revisit it at another date.
Respectfully, I'd like to remind members that this is an action plan, not about the detail of things. I think it is entirely regrettable that we haven't had the workshop in good time, because I think members would probably not take the same view if they'd had the workshop. Those of us who have kept abreast of this and followed it know that there are perfectly good reasons to support this, because it will cut across the whole board. And I am very, very mindful of the need to fit in with the government wishes on this one, because we are going to them to ask for support for our longevity as a unitary authority. Councillor Sims.
I am very aware that we should have had this workshop. I know quite a lot about this. I've had numerous discussions with this, and I think it's a very good plan. But however, I can understand members being reluctant to run with this because they basically don't know enough about it. We should have had the workshop, and I would be very happy to defer this decision if it's viable to the May meeting post-workshop. I think that makes absolute complete sense, because I really could not ask you as members to sort of step into the dark, which is what you're effectively doing here.
I would happily second that. I would also just say, again, on a matter of clarity, on a lack of clarity on this issue, if you like, it's my understanding that we have an elected member, because I proposed him at the meeting, who is a Smart Island champion, czar, something like that, and it's Councillor McCarthy, who unfortunately is ill at the moment, so I fully understand isn't in a position to be able to
taken that on
deal with that
in his
issue.
absence.
It is my understanding, Councillor Sims, that at the request of Councillor McCarthy, you have taken on that role. It's also my understanding that you have been in touch with Councillor Guy and requested that he take on that role, and it's also my understanding that Councillor Guy has been in touch with me and asked me to take on that role. So we don't seem to be entirely clear about A, who wants to do it, B, who is doing it, and C, who should do it.
I think we're talking about future arrangements, not present arrangements.
It was suggested when we had a meeting, I suggested when we had a meeting that it be two councillors should be more involved in this rather than just one, on the basis of having, if somebody's on the mainland. I think it's useful to have a voice, if you like. So that was the basis why I asked Andy. It wasn't really for him to take it on properly, and I think it's just useful if a couple of members are very, very well versed in this. I mean, it wasn't. I wasn't trying to hive it off onto somebody else. I wanted a deputy.
Sorry, Ted, can I just... Yeah, no, I appreciate that, but the fact of the matter is, that may well have been your intention, but the outcome was that I received a phone call or had a message outside this chamber saying, you can do that. Now, therefore, it shows a lack of clarity on this issue, doesn't it? So, you know, therefore, I think that highlights the necessity to have the workshop, establish exactly where we are, who's doing what, you know, who's driving this, and then have this after the workshop. And if that's your proposal, I'll happily second that.
I would suggest that, as we have decided on other things, that it would be as well to approve the action plan, and then at the time of the workshop we can amend the budget.
I'm
absolutely fine with that.
We ought to remember that when we implement something through grant funding, fair enough, whatever it is, once it's implemented and carried on, it then has to be financed out of revenue. The stuff
Absolutely correct, Councillor Bilsma.
Yeah, well, a lot of people realise this. It isn't as good as it sounds.
Yep. Councillor Mrs. Goddard.
Sorry, just for clarification, Chairman, presumably we can't take any decision to amend a budget at an informal meeting. I take it you mean after the workshop?
Yes, when
the
it comes
budget will come to full council in May.
proper committee cycle, yeah.
Yes, quite.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
could I also suggest that we seem to be a little bit unsure who's doing the Smart Islands work at the moment. I'm sure we're all going to try and take more of
No,
an
we're
interest.
not unsure. Councillor McCarthy is on sick
Fine.
leave.
Yeah.
Councillor Sims is his...
I've never seen any paper presented to the committee on the Smart Islands project. Perhaps I missed it, but the implication has been this morning that anybody could ask any member of the Teddy committee to learn about Smart Islands. No, they can't. And I, for one, am in a position I'm often in now when I don't know what I don't know. And I find that the claim this morning that if we don't go with the Smart Islands project, we might end up having our unitary authority status removed by the government, that's sort of a bit threatening.
I didn't actually say that. What I said was I'm conscious of the need to work with the government. Councillor Molson.
I'm quite happy to support Councillor Sims and Councillor O'Neill in the deferral of a decision on this. Just to clarify, this will not have any impact on the approval of the budget whatsoever as far as we are at the moment. Is
Mr.
that
Barrett,
correct?
could you comment?
Can I just reiterate the fact that these are indicative figures and programmes? If any sums are to be incurred, they will be done on the basis of a full business case approach, which will be agreed at the relevant committee. So this is purely indicative. One of the other things I want to say at this juncture is that we, as an authority, have not been very good at monitoring our capital programmes overall over the last several years, and we are putting in place measures to be able to do that as well. And the final point is actually the business case approach will actually review what the likely revenue implications will be, and it will do that consistently across all projects. But the first one, the primary one, this is an indicative programme that we're asking you to approve at this stage. No spend is committed until the business case for a specific project is approved in the relevant committee.
Thank you for that clarification, and that was what I was seeking, is the fact that I am quite then therefore prepared to support the position of Councillor Sims and Councillor O'Neill.
On the basis of what Ben has just told us, I don't think we're actually taking any risks at all if we just run with the programme as it stands. And it still can come to full council in May to be firmed up post-workshop. So while I'm not withdrawing my proposal, I don't think it's actually necessary anymore.
Well, respectfully, the only danger, as I see it, on that issue is that we will be approving a broad brush approach to an action plan before we've got enough information about the subject in hand. And then, undoubtedly, call me cynical, I can imagine a scenario whereby I'm sat in this very chamber being told, well, you approved it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Thank you very much.
Right. May I know your wishes then?
I thought we got a proposal on the
Yeah,
table.
but you said that you based it on Councillor Sims and he's now withdrawn.
Councillor Sims,
No, he hasn't
Withdrawn it.
No, no, no. I beg your
And
pardon.
I'm saying it's not strictly speaking necessary.
I thought he said it was no
No,
longer necessary.
it's still on the table, and I would continue to support that.
All
Certainly.
right, well, can we have that reiterated so members can be quite clear?
That we defer this until the nearest meeting to this, which is in May, on the basis that I think members definitely need a workshop to make a reasonable decision on this. I think it would be possibly not. Well, I think it's putting them in a position which they don't wish to be in.
And can I repeat Councillor Molson's earlier question, as I understood it, to Mr Barrett, that won't affect us setting a balanced budget?
Could I ask for some clarity on this? Now, are you talking about the whole set of tables, or are you just talking about one line on that table in that specific project?
I think we're talking about a specific project.
I understood, my understanding is it's the Smart Islands project we're talking about only.
So that if we remove the line which includes the Smart Island project and defer that for further discussion post-workshop, everybody's happy with that, yeah? Okay?
Yes, I concur that. I mean, my concern was if you were talking about the whole capital programme to be removed.
But on the basis of removing the line, we can set the balanced budget, yes?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. Members all quite clear on that? Councillor Mrs. Grotto.
Can I just ask, we're deferring at the moment all consideration of Smart Island project from the capital budget. The Smart Islands is removed effectively at the moment.
We've said we're removing the line from the budget at the moment.
All lines, there's more than one lines, Chairman. It pops up all over the place. We're removing all reference to Smart Islands from the current capital budget and deferring it until we have more information. Let me say, I'm not averse to Smart Islands at all. I'm averse to it coming to us now.
Fine, okay.
Yes, that was my understanding, that anything on the capital budget specifically relating to Smart Island technology is deferred until such times as we have more information, which will come to us in the fashion of a workshop that I believe is already in the calendar that may need moving because it clashes with another meeting.
It's removed and deferred. Sorry, it's removed. Yes. That's the key word, is it's removed.
Thank you. Right. Been recommended, proposed and seconded that the reference to Smart Island be removed from the budget that we are considering at present, and that it will be, further discussion of this will be at the meeting following the workshop. Yep. Those in favour of that, please show. I think it's unanimous. Yeah, nobody's against and nobody's abstaining. Fine. Can we return to recommendation number 2 on the basis that we've now deleted reference to Smart Islands? May I know your wishes about the rest of the revenue and capital budget estimates? Councillor Molson.
Chairman, I am quite prepared to propose, now that that's been removed out of it, that we accept the revenue and capital budgets as presented to the committee with the provisos that we've already agreed for 16 and 17.
Thank you. Councillor Francis. Seconded. No further debate. Councillor Mrs. Grottick.
Sorry, just to clarify, can you tell me, can I ask Mr Barrett if that commits us to spending £600,000 from the housing reserves to demolish Carn Thomas, because it would effectively use half of the housing reserves, and I am very committed to elder care, supported assisted living housing and key worker housing, and it will obviously impact greatly on that. Are you saying we are totally committed to the 600,000?
I refer to my earlier comment that this is an indicative sum. Any business case will be brought before the relevant committee for that sum to be approved. So,
fine, on that basis, I'm happy to move forward.
Right, if there are no further comments, those in favour, please show clearly. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We need to do recommendation number 4, that members note the projected position on reserves for information. May I know your thoughts? Councillor Billsborough, proposed. Thank you. Seconded. So, are you seconding it?
I am. Since we are just noting a projected position and are going to do further work on it, I'm perfectly happy to second it.
Thank you. Those in favour, please show. Clearly. Yep. Thank you. I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Then we will proceed with item number 8. If somebody could ask the officers to step back in, that would be very kind.
No, we should have had the workshop. I'd like to ask questions and answers.
I didn't know what to say. Because they have had one of discussions and meetings to hear the weather talk is shocking. This community do it.
No, because they're all common.
Could I just ask if the Senior Manager for Services to our Community is coming back? Right, okay, then in that case there's no reason not to proceed. Agenda item 8. I'll leave it to the Senior Manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is Treasury Management Strategy for 2016-17. This is an area in which the authority has actually been quite weak on in recent years. The CIPFA Code of Treasury Management requires three points of reporting to members on an annual basis. The first is the setting of the Treasury Management Policy and the practices, which you have before you in the current report and associated appendix, which is the policy statement. The second, we are required to report to members on a 6-monthly basis any Treasury Management activities and the resulting cash flows for those. And the final one is an annual follow-up report on Treasury Management. What I'm trying to do with this report is to provide these and to provide at least the minimum level that the code requires for us to undertake.
Thank you. Councillor Billsborough.
Yes, I will accept that, Chairman. I just have one question. On page 28, 5.5, risk management, it says the authority's revenue cash is held by the bank. Which bank is it? It's not the Bank of Damascus or anything like that. Wait, no, seriously, which bank is it?
Our current arrangements with Lloyds Banking Group.
Okay, Chair. In that case, I propose to accept the recommendation.
Thank you. Right, are there any comments or is that seconded? Please may I know your wishes? It's been proposed by Councillor Billsborough. Is that seconded? Councillor Neal, thank you. Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Nobody against, nobody abstaining. Thank you very much. Move on to item 9, Park House fees and charges. Report to the Senior Officer for Adult Care.
Good morning, everyone. So the paper you've got in front of you was actually debated at length at the Community Service Committee on the 25th of January, where it was requested that we submit to full council for approval and for recommendations for implementation. Recommendation 3 has been removed. I understand that's already been addressed in the session today. So what we're asking is that there's the recommended fee increase contained within the paper, and that this is applied for all new residents from the 1st of April 2016, and for existing residents following 1 month's notice from 1st of April 16, and with a charge of 50% for the first 3 months and then full cost thereafter. Okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Billsborough.
Yes, Chairman. On page 46, paragraph 3.6, it says, increasing the fees to meet the unit costs is not recommended. And then later on, we are going to increase the fees. Any comment on that?
Absolutely sure. Yeah, well, the unit costs we worked out were about £1,300. So what we were proposing is that we didn't increase it to £1,300. That it was slightly more at a more of a market rate, which was 70%.
So just to refresh my memory, if we increase these fees, what will the fees be for people who are in Park House? What are we talking about? We're going to increase by 70%, but can we know what they'll be then?
They are,
Page 55.
Mr. Peters, could you use the mic when you're speaking, please, because otherwise it won't pick up.
Okay. So there's two rates. There's this standard rate and the rate for adults with dementia. So the 70% increase for standard care will be £908.22. £8.22.
£980.
£908.22.
Yeah,
and we're recommending for adults with diagnosis of dementia with associated higher needs that the weekly rate goes up to £1,095.25.
And Chairman, so we are going to implement these from April the 1st. Now this is a considerable increase in fee. Now, I know that we can't bear the cost ourselves, but I would have thought before we introduce these fees, we again go through this business in detail of looking what it costs to run community services. This is one of the areas where we haven't been given full details of.
Councillor Bilsborough, I think you'll find that we have discussed this in committee and informal session on very many occasions. We all regret the need to raise any costs at all. But it's the choice between doing that and losing a very valuable service. We need to keep the service, we need to improve the service, enhance it where possible. We cannot do that without making certain elements of it pay for themselves better.
I agree, Chair, but there is one small point, that dementia is a disease, and a disease, anybody who has a disease, it's not age, it's a disease of the brain. That is treatable, or no, comes under the National Health Service. Then the National Health Service, it should do, it's a disease. If you have a disease, the National Health Service covers it. Then the National Health Service hands it over to social services, and then they'll say, we'll have your savings until you get down to 14,000.
Councillor Bilsborough, we are, we reclaim as much money as we can from the National Health Service. Officers strive to do their best in that sense. We are talking about the self-funding residents, and we need to find a way forward. Mr. Peters, do you wish to make a further comment to this?
Councillor Brewer was talking about continuing healthcare funding, which is a healthcare funding route to support. There is, we discussed this at length in Community Service Committee previously. We do access that funding route where we can. It's a difficult funding route to apply. It certainly does not apply to all people with dementia. It's for people with complex, high dependency needs, and we review that. And if there are people that we feel would be eligible, and that there are, and we've been successful in identifying that funding route, but it's certainly not going to be for everybody. The reality of funding adult social care across the country is as it is, that there's a financial assessment, it's a nationally applied financial process. And it's difficult, I understand that, but it's the way it is. And these fees actually won't, the majority of residents often aren't full cost payers, aren't self-funders, so the majority of residents in Park House there is a subsidy to the council. Not a lot of people have a lot of money actually. So there's always about 30-40% of people will be full cost payers. So this will bring in income, but not income to cover the subsidy. So there will continue to be a substantial subsidy required. So it's just it's one element.
I understand, Chairman, I made my point.
Thank you. Councillor Mawson.
As regrettable as these increases are, I think there is something that we ought to consider, is the fact that as we stand at the moment, our charges are considerably lower than they are on the mainland, massively so from my past professional existence and the like. I think it's the only way forward that we've got to preserve a service that I think all of us around this table consider we need to keep on the islands.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the Senior Manager for Community Services if she's got anything she'd like to add to the debate.
No, I don't. I think Councillor Molson summed up exactly. It's about the viability of the service, and it will be a charge exerted on those who can afford to pay, and that affordability is set nationally, not by this local authority.
Thank you. Councillor Sims.
Regarding Councillor Bilsborough's last point, without going into the ins and outs of it, if the NHS is paying for care because of the circumstances of the particular individual, then they would be paying the going rate. Now, with the going rate as, say, £600, then the council will be effectively subsidising the NHS in those circumstances by 500-600. So the council will still be subsidising the NHS if it's set at 908, because there's 300 or 400 pounds in addition, if you get my point. And another point, just a more general point, I think we come to this impasse with, frankly, horrendous price increases, because what this council seems to do, for very nice, noble, quick, compassionate reasons, we just don't set fees and charges, if we don't put them up sensibly in times when money's not a big issue, and then you get a situation like this and you just go into a wall, and it's something that we really need to be thinking about every time we set fees and charges. Is this rational? Is it the sensible way forward, or are we going to run into another wall in 5 years' time? And I think we need to take a very, very considered view about all the fees and charges we set on that basis, because it has to be realistic, because eventually you get a situation like this, which is not pleasant for anybody.
But it's useful information, Chairman, except that, one point if I may, useful information, except there have been cases where people who thought they had to pay, they've challenged this, and they have, I know this, they have been successful in getting money out of national health.
Yeah, but Councillor Billsborough, we are not here to talk about individual cases. We are here to talk about the overarching thing. Are there any further comments? May I know your wishes? Councillor Mrs Bennett.
Yes, I would just like to ask, Chairman, whether there is, a risk of outpricing the service, and whether the continuation of the service depends on a certain scale of operation.
Mr Peters, would you like to?
The majority of care homes on the mainland are 40, 50, 60 bedded homes. That's the only way they make it viable. At the moment, Park House has 6 residents. So the unit costs of 1,300 were based on occupancy of 10 people. So we were at 6 residents now, so maybe it's £600 a week, £1,700 a week. I mean, so it's viability. No, it's not a viable service from a business model, in my opinion, and looking at the maths. So it's about, and I think there's consequences of any fee increase. So I know that the NHS Kerno, who are the commissioner, the health commissioners, they've got to save 30 million, and I think 12 million of that is on continuing healthcare funded care pathways. So if we increase our fees to £1,100 a week, the people who are health funded in the care home, the commissioners might take a view on that. So there will be a kind of knock-on conversations. The priority ones, of course, are the residents who are paying full costs on their families. So we need to have that conversation. But I think there's a consequence to everything, absolutely. But as a business model, it doesn't quite stack up.
Thank you. Councillor Daly.
Propose a recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Grottick.
I'll second that recommendation.
Thank you very much. Are there any further comments? If not, I'll take the recommendations that have been proposed by Councillor Daly and seconded by Councillor Mrs Grottick. Those in favour, please show clearly. Thank you. Those against, please show clearly. Those abstaining, please show clearly. So 1 abstention. Thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item 10. Report of the Senior Officer for Democratic and Licensing.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the revised scheme, which takes account of the decision that is pointed out in 1.3 that members took at the December meeting of Council. The scheme is enlarged somewhat to provide a better way of calculating part payments that make it absolutely clear to members and to officers administering this scheme how the part days will be provided for. The second part of this report follows on from 1.3 in that in the approval in the minute 9015, members also asked for a revised maintenance subsistence rates for 2016-17, and I have provided those as part of the scheme highlighted in yellow on page 67. These are not greatly increased. They follow the advice of the panel and also should provide a better support for members when they have to go away on behalf of the council. We have had several cases where members have had to pay a supplement themselves in order to do business for the council, because obviously that there is a top level, and this should alleviate that, Chairman.
Thank you for that. The only comment that I would make, that in current circumstances with the excessive pressures on budget, I find it very difficult to support an increase in these fees.
I agree.
Chairman, I don't have a comment. It was one of the things that members brought to the attention of the panel, that they were having to subsidise going to attending meetings on behalf of the council, and I have just followed that through. It's not an excessive increase. It's pretty minimal, but it will cover the cost of a hotel in London, and it will cover the cost of overnight accommodation elsewhere. We're not in this to make a profit, Chairman, merely to cover the costs.
As I understand, it's setting a limit. It's not actually recommending a figure.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but from a political point of view, I personally would propose that we set the allowances as they were last year rather than any increase whatsoever. I think
I would second that, Chairman.
As we are in a situation where we are strapped for cash, any savings that we can make, we should do, and the members can swallow that as well.
Fine. I think we must then leave it or be prepared to accept that some members will not be able to carry out their functions if they're not prepared to pay the extra. So as long as
this is a full council meeting, Chairman, and I'm not hearing any members complaining.
I think to complain, one would have to declare an interest. I am more than happy to do that, if you like, because I am struggling as chairman of council to go to all the things I'm expected to, and sometimes I have been expected to pay the difference.
By that logic, though, Chairman, if one of us as an elected member has to declare an interest in this, then we all have to.
No, but that's why I hadn't said anything, because I didn't want to make it a personal
But you just
case.
have.
Until you'd said it, I wasn't going to.
So, but you're not declaring an interest, which I don't think necessarily personally think that you should, but that's your decision to make. But you have commented on it.
I wouldn't have commented unless you said that nobody around the table was going to say anything, that was all. Anyway, that's just a personal... Councillor Mrs Grottet.
Thank you. I do understand that when we approved the scheme of allowances, actually there wasn't much movement. The only thing, and I better declare an interest because I'm Vice Chair of Community Services, it was recognised that the workload of a Vice Chair can be quite onerous, indeed should be quite onerous, because you should support your Chair at every opportunity. So that was the only movement in the scheme of allowances.
Chairman, I'm sorry, we're not discussing the scheme of allowances.
Well, precisely, but we are surely, sorry Mrs Pritchard, we're actually approving the member scheme allowances. I'm just asking for clarification.
No, you're approving the wording of the scheme of allowances. You have approved in December the raise for Vice Chairman. We are not discussing a raise in allowances. We're discussing a raise in the subsistence rates. That's all.
Fine, then I would say that it's up to individual members whether or not they claim them. I can stay with a friend, luckily, when I go away for the Cornwall Partnership Trust, so I'm quite happy, you know, not to put in a claim. It's up to individual members. However, I would say I find it absolutely unfair that any member should have to subsidise their work on behalf of the authority. We don't have high allowances, and the subsistence rates must surely be set so that you can claim a reasonable standard of accommodation and added on costs.
Councillor O'Neill.
I completely agree, but I would have thought that particularly for the chairman of council, that there must be a mechanism in place whereby if we end up in a situation whereby you are requested or required to attend a meeting on behalf of this authority and simply can't because of your personal financial situation, that is entirely unacceptable, because what we're then creating is a situation whereby the only people that can stand for election on this authority are people in a financial position to do so, which is unacceptable.
Which is entirely the reason that these papers
I still
come to
don't
council.
think it's necessary to amend that budget. I think if you find yourself, any member finds finds themselves in a position where they cannot attend a meeting that is required for this authority because of a financial situation, then there should be a mechanism in place to be able to address that. But I'm not convinced. Yeah, but I'm not convinced that this is. I'm sorry, you can hold your head in your hands again, Chairman, which I do find slightly disrespectful, I must say. I do not think it's appropriate for us as an authority to be increasing our allowances whilst we're talking about cutting jobs.
But there is no discussion on the table to increase an allowance.
No. Well, it's
what is on the
mainland
table
subsistence
is the limit.
rates is an allowance.
No, it's not an allowance.
That's
It is
semantics.
a limit to which extent members are allowed to put a claim forward. Any claim has to be duly evidenced with receipts, which is always the case.
Yes, but surely
All
that's
that has
semantics,
changed-
because what you're saying is there is a fixed sum that you are allowed to spend.
No,
or
that's not. There's a limit to which this local authority will reimburse the cost. It is not an allowance scheme as such.
Councillor O'Neill, trust your colleagues on this one. I'm sure they're not all going and staying at the Ritz. It won't cover that.
I think it is. Sorry. I was going to say it is entirely up to members what decision they make. I mean, it's a personal choice.
I was only going to say the difference between an allowance and subsistence is an allowance you can claim with no evidence, as the Chief Executive has said, but you have to provide me with evidence for me to be able to sign off your claim if you're staying at a hotel or a guest house or going for a meal. You have to provide that receipt. If you don't get the money. I won't sign it off, and that comes across the board. Whereas your allowance is there for the taking, and you can have all of it, 50% or whatever you choose.
Yes, I understand that, but if I go and have to spend a night in Redruth or Truro or Falmouth because I'm attending a council meeting, there are various budget options available, whether that be a restaurant or a hotel. And if my budget, what isn't an allowance, is fixed at this point, I'm not going to look at a hotel in this price range, am I? I'm going to look at one below that allowance, which it isn't, apparently.
Chairman, as a woman, and I'm well aware that there are a number of councillors who are women, you would tend to look sometimes for better safety in a slightly more expensive hotel than you might as a man.
I'm incredibly confused now that this discussion is taken a turn of sexual equality or...
Can we...
Perhaps we can take a cut, perhaps the chaps can take a cut in theirs. I'm perfectly happy for
Councillor
that.
Francis, can I bring in people in order that they've had their lights on, please? Councillor Sims and then Councillor Mrs Mumford.
I'm always very uncomfortable with us making decisions because of political expediency, which brings me back to park house, airport charges and things like that. We do it all too often, and I think this one is the same thing. It's a sensible thing to do. And okay, we are making cuts in other areas, but however, we have a situation now where we haven't got enough councillors, and this is just slightly another incremental bias against it. And I think that given the small cost and everything's going up, I don't actually think, I have no issue with this at all. I don't really care if it's politically expedient or not. It's a pragmatic, sensible move.
Councillor Mrs Mumford.
Yes, I would agree with this. I think if our chairman is representing the council in London, I don't think £150 for accommodation is bad, actually. In fact, I think we'd probably, it would be a lot more, but I believe that these allowances are fine, and perhaps actually they're not enough, but in this...
Can we just remove it from individual councillors? We're talking about a policy
I'm sorry.
here. No, it's my fault because I shouldn't have risen to the comment before. And I want to make it quite clear that I'm not going to take part in the vote because I did speak about a personal one, so I shan't
I think
take part.
these prices are quite reasonable, and I think if any of us have got friends who we stay with, I'm quite sure I certainly wouldn't put a bill in for £25 to stay with friends, and I wouldn't even charge for my food because you've got to eat when you're at home anyway, haven't you?
Thank you.
But I think it's mainly the accommodation that the hotels in London can be very expensive. I would agree with
think
this.
the problem doesn't occur and this I speak for all members, when one schedules a meeting and can book a long time in advance, it's the impromptu meetings that can be quite urgent. The cost can be, at the last minute, quite scary sometimes, so I think we bear that in mind. However, it is nonetheless the decision of members, and as I said, I'm not going to take part in the vote. However, may I know your wishes?
I'd like to propose the recommendation.
Proposed 1 and 2 by Councillor Mrs Mumford, second by Councillor Sims. Councillor Daly, do you want to make a comment? No. Those in favour of approving 1 and 2, please show clearly. Thank you. Those against, please show clearly. Right, in that case it's carried. Thank you very much.
Don't have to think.
I don't.
No.
That concludes the items in part 1 of the agenda. Part 2 is a report for information only concerning an executive decision about voting fees and charges. Councillor Mrs Mumford.
Oh, sorry.
There are no part 3 reports, so that concludes the meeting. Thank you for attending. Councillor O'Neill, may I have a word, please?